Sin City was directed by Robert Rodriguez and stars Bruce Willis, Jessica Alba, Clive Owen, Benicio del Toro, Brittany Murphy, Mickey Rourke, bunch of great talented actors and actresses. And this is a pretty old comic book movie, isn't it? Why am I reviewing Sin City? Because I've wanted to do this for quite some time now. One of the things that was always on my list was if I ever get a chance, talk about Sin City, because it's one of the more fascinating films for me, and I mean that in a very good way. Ever since I saw this film, it's left sort of an impact. And I've gone back to it multiple times since then. I quite like this movie actually. And it's one of the better comic book movies I've actually seen. In fact, many times when people ask about my top 15 or 20 comic book movies of all time, this is definitely up there on that list, along with a lot of other films. So for preparation in this review, I actually watched the recut unrated extended version. That's the version I've seen the most because not only do I think that's a better version of the film, I think that's the version of the film that's definitive. I think that one makes it much more cohesive, and I think it actually, the extended stuff and the uncut stuff really helps sell the film's goriness, the violence, and its material a lot more. In fact, I think in this case it's a positive to have an extended cut. It's one of the few times where I've appreciated a film being extended and it actually worked out. Most of the times it works, usually, but there are some times where I think, oh, you didn't need to do that. That was pretty unnecessary. It's a complicated film to talk about because there's no one storyline. This is divided into three different stories, and there's one mini story also in the background. So it's tough to try and talk about this as a cohesive narrative because part of you also realizes you kind of have to break this down into three parts and talk about each particular story in its own regard because they're also directed in different ways. All of them are directed mostly by Robert Rodriguez, but there are scenes in this film which were directed by Quentin Tarantino as well. And so you sort of have to backtrack and be like, all right, so you can tell why this is different from that and why that's different. Yeah, okay. This is not the last time they contributed because later on they would contribute on the Grindhouse stuff with Death Proof and Planet Terror. But it's really cool to revisit this film like that because their collaboration can be seen. And more so, Robert Rodriguez as a director has a lot of ups and downs. He doesn't always make the best movies ever, but sometimes he makes films like this, which are incredibly unique. At the time, the color grading was something that was consistently praised about Sin City, and I would say that's still one of the highlights of the entire film. I'm actually not going to talk too much about the plot details because if you've not seen the film or read the graphic novels by Frank Miller, then I don't want to spoil anything because I think people should then end up seeing the film and actually give it a shot. There's a lot to love in this movie. The performances also, all of them are really, really great. It's a very gritty neo-noir kind of film. And I think one of the things about it that works so well is just the tone of it. It has a lot of bizarre visual imagery and scenes, and certain stuff that you just couldn't pull off if it wasn't based on a graphic novel medium or anything of the sort. Like blood is heavily stylized. It's those whites every time someone's hand or something is severed. Like that happens a few times in this movie. The blood is white in color. So that's pretty cool. Those little moments here and there, those nuggets, are what makes Sin City so great to watch and rewatch. There's also specific things in the film that are given color over other things, which was also really well handled. For instance, the red dress on this woman in The Customer is Always Right mini story. The yellow bastard, he's the only one who really has color in the entire thing, the yellow guy, which was also really great. And the detail which they captured that with is impressive. The visual effects are really staggering in this movie. And they look a little cheap, don't they, at times? Like it looks like it was very simple. Robert Rodriguez's movies infamously have this sort of sense to them, except for movies like Alita Battle Angel, which were kind of made with this green screen that he has, and they're much more personally produced. And so they can look pretty simple in that regard, and for some critics, they might say that, oh, that looks a little cheap. But in actuality, in this case, it actually works. The look of Sin City, or, well, base Sin City, it actually works really well with the visual appeal that Robert Rodriguez has. So the city feels like a very interesting character throughout the entire film's runtime, which is 2 hours and 21 minutes with the recut extended stuff. And it is definitely a positive factor to the film, and the direction in this case is also really spot on. The film isn't always perfect, don't get me wrong. When it has weak moments of dialogue, You can tell it has very weak moments of dialogue. But what really makes this film elevate are its stylistic choices, its characters for the most part. Mickey Rourke's storyline is really, really great. Rosario Dawson, Clive Owen, their performances are great. Bruce Willis is fantastic in this movie. And even though he's not in this one too much, Powers Booth as Rourke stole the scene he was in right up from under Bruce Willis's feet. So that was really, really great. He's in the sequel a lot more, which I'll talk about someday, which surprisingly also I don't hate the sequel. The sequel gets a lot of flack. I don't quite understand why. I actually kind of didn't mind that movie. Kind of enjoyed it. It's weaker than this one, but whatever. This is a film that I've wanted to talk about also since Alita Battle Angel, because I reviewed that movie and I talked about Sin City as like, oh, that was one of the best Robert Rodriguez films. There's so much I want to talk about, and there's at the same time I feel like I don't want to go into it too much because I know there are people out there who haven't seen the film, and I know that there are people out there who are wondering if they should ever give it a chance, maybe, or if it just doesn't look like their cup of tea. And in some cases, yes, I can see Sin City not being someone's cup of tea. I can definitely see that happening. It's not a film that's going to get universal love. It has many thematic elements, it has many images that are disturbing and not for everyone. And sometimes it goes so over the top that you have to blur that line of realism versus fiction quite a bit, which is not so hard to do because there's a lot of fictional shit in this movie, which will probably make it easier for you to swallow certain pills later on. Also, when you get to the final story, the big fat kill, there is so much absurd craziness in it, like Benicio del Toro's talking head, that yeah, you can sort of just blur the line very easily right around then. That was actually one of the best parts of the film for me. And I gotta talk about Jessica Alba because she's doing this thing, and was one of the first childhood crushes. So yeah, I have no regrets stating this at this time. Yeah, the soundtrack's great. It's beautifully filmed, directed, produced. It all comes together pretty well. Aside from a few moments here and there, I quite like this movie. It's one of the better comic book movies, in my opinion. It's almost a perfect film. Almost a perfect film. And for that reason, I'm going to give Sin City a 9.5 out of 10. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Look forward to more reviews very soon. On Monday will be the review for the Clone Wars final season. Looking forward to talking about that. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.